Pete the Cat's got class. It's math time, says Pete's teacher, Mr. G. Pete the cat loves math. He loves how the numbers work together. If I add 3 red blocks and 4 yellow blocks together, how many blocks would we all have in all? Says Mr. G. Pete raises his hand. 7 blocks, says Pete. 3 plus 4 equals 7. Very good, Pete, says Mr. G. Mr. G asks the class a subtraction question. If I take 2 blocks away from 7 blocks, how many blocks will be left? Pete raises his hand, but the teacher calls on Tom. 9, says Tom. Pete feels bad for Tom. Tom is super smart. He can name all the dinosaurs. He just has trouble with math. Pete has an idea. He will help Tom become awesome at math. Helping is cool. On the bus home from school, Pete sits next to Tom. Do you want to come over to play? Tom asks. I got some cool new race cars for my birthday. Awesome, says Pete. We can do our math homework, and then we can race the cars. I hate math, says Tom. You don't hate math, Pete tells Tom. You just don't love it yet. Pete sets up some blocks. If I add 5 blue blocks and 3 orange blocks together, how many blocks will I have in all? This is boring, says Tom. Can we play with my race cars? This gives Pete a great idea. Sure we can, he says. Pete lines up some race cars. If I have 5 red cars, if 5 red cars are going to the racetrack and 5 yellow cars are going to the car wash, how many cars are on the road? He asks. Easy, says Tom. 10 cars, like a traffic jam. Now what if 2 of the cars stayed home? Pete says. How many cars would be left? Says Tom, studying the lineup. 8 cars. Right, says Pete. See? I told you math is awesome. Pete quizzes Tom on one math problem after the next. 4 cars minus 1. 3, says Tom. 8 cars plus 7, says Pete. 15, says Tom. I can't believe it. I'm doing math, and I'm loving it. Pete and Tom do their homework. Let me know if you need my help, says Pete. Thanks, says Tom, but I know what I'm doing now. The next day, Pete hands in his math homework. Tom does too. After lunch, the teacher passes back their assignment. Pete and Tom each got 1 wrong. I'd like to see you 2 after class, Mr. G says. You both know not to copy someone else's homework, says Mr. G. We didn't copy, says Pete. You both got the exact same answer wrong, Mr. G tells them. How can we prove that we got the answers on our own, says Tom. I know, Pete tells him. Bring your race cars to school tomorrow. Why? Tom asks. You'll see, says Pete with a smile. The next day, Pete and Tom get to school early. What are all these race cars for? Asked Mr. G. To show you how Tom got to be so good at math, says Pete. Give Tom a math problem, Pete says. Any math problem. I'll get it right, says Tom, without Pete's help. Mr. G gives Tom one math problem after another, and Tom uses the race cars to get all the answers right. Wow, says Mr. G, I am impressed. Pete helped me by making math fun, says Tom. I think that's something we can all learn from Pete, Mr. G says. Take it from Pete, math is neat.